where we are right now, are we restrictive? Is the current level of the yield curve, is it restrictive to the U.S. economy?
If your inflation target is 2%, you're probably neutral now. If your inflation target is a more appropriate 2 plus something, and that something is much closer to 3%. So if your inflation target is near 3%, which is where it should be, we are restrictive and we risk damaging growth unnecessarily.
You had a lot of ifs there. So nobody really knows whether it matters, though, doesn't it? If we're not restrictive, and I don't know if you can tell whether we are from how strong the economy is. I would think it's tough to find places that make it look like we're restrictive. There'd be no reason to cut at all this year. And you're starting to see people say that. Where are you now? 2 cuts? Get us down to, I don't know, get us down to 5 or so with inflation somewhere between 2 and 3?
I am where I was when the market was 6 to 7 cuts, and where now some people are saying no cuts. We're going to see 2 to 3 cuts this year. That would be appropriate. If we don't get any cuts, which is increasingly what the market is worried about, then the market is correct to worry about economic growth and to worry about earnings. But we should get 2 to 3 cuts.
What do you see? I mean, it's not just us. I know maybe people say America first, but it matters what happens in Europe, and it matters what happens, I think, in China. And how's that going to play into does it play into what we should be doing here, Mohamed, or really we just focus on domestic issues?
So, of course, it plays in. Look, China's deflation, and China has a host of problems, and they can be easily tipped into what's called the dreaded middle income trap. China's deflation will help us as we import things from there. But our reality is the reality of Europe, which is we no longer live in a world where there isn't enough demand. We live in a world where supply is no longer flexible enough. And that has to do with lots of things, and it's not going to go away. So our reality is that the supply side isn't flexible enough. Governments aren't doing enough to help the supply side. And as a result of that, Joe, the last mile, getting to 2%, is really, really difficult. And we're starting to get a sense of that from the data.
Interesting, Mohamed. And for someone who's talked about new normals, old normals, I don't know. Have you got a new McKinsey term for what the hell where we are right now? Are we back to the old normal, or it's a new normal 2.0? What are we?
I don't have a term for you, Joe. All I tend to stress is always step back and look at the broader picture, because unless you understand the secular forces, and now it is the supply side that's in control. For a long time, it was all about deficient demand. And that's why governments and central banks threw money at it, and we didn't get inflation, and it looked like we're getting a free ride. When supply is the issue, then economic management is actually much harder, and that's where we are today.
So to recap, Mohamed said if we have an inflation target of 2%, we're about neutral right now. If we have an inflation target of 3%, which is what he thinks we should aim for, then we're too restrictive and we're hurting the economy unnecessarily right now. He said 2 to 3 cuts should be appropriate this year. If we get 0 cuts, it's right for the market to fear a pullback and slow down in economic growth and a slowdown in earnings. Mohamed El-Erian said, quote, "Though it's right for the economic data to influence the Fed's policy approach, there is a difference between being informed and being held hostage by the data. A Fed that is held hostage by the data is asking for trouble. It tips the balance of risk-reward to keeping rates too restrictive for too long," end quote. He says the last mile to 2% inflation is going to be very, very hard to attain. And to wrap it up, he said when supply is the issue, it makes managing the economy very, very hard, a lot harder than when demand is the issue. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned something. Smash that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.